Today is July 10th, 2014. My name is Cheryl Walker. I am conducting an oral history interview at Springfield, Illinois, at the American Legion Convention. Deborah Cohen Rojas is the court reporter, and Albert Gangolf will be the veteran. Okay, Mr. Gangolf, how are you today?
I'm just fine. You can call me Bert.
Bert?
Yeah, it's my nickname is Bert.
Okay. Where and when were you born?
Chicago, Illinois, 22 October 1948.
Okay. Who were your parents?
Who?
Who were your parents?
Eleanor and Albert Gangolf.
Okay, and what did they do for a living?
My mother was, she stayed at home. And my dad was a electrical purchasing agent.
Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I have one brother, Larry, and one sister, Cheryl.
Okay, and did either one of them go into the military?
No.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
I was classified as a temporary electrician's apprentice. So I was working construction in steel mills in Indiana.
In which branch of the military did you serve?
United States Air Force.
So did you enlist?
Yes.
And why did you choose the Air Force?
I decided not to be drafted into the Marines by Richard Milhouse Nixon. He was the President of the United States at that time.
Okay.
I chose my own destination.
Okay. What happened when you departed for training camp and during your early days of training?
Oh my. That was the 8th of January of 1969, and we left out of O'Hare Air Base, which is airport, and we flew down to Lackland Air Base in San Antonio, Texas. And we went from snow and blow to 70 degrees in 2 hours. But we did have a couple nights there where it got down to 2 below. But barracks we were in, they were 50-man dormitories, and they had been rehabbed. They were built before World War II. So there was 25 of us on each floor that shared 1 out of 3 toilets, and we were not allowed to use the urinals, and only 1 sink out of 3, but we could use the 4 shower heads. It was a matter of learning discipline and how to work as a team.
You said you flew in to...
And my arms got tired.
They did. So you took an airplane.
Took a jet from O'Hare.
Took a jet. And then did you take a bus?
Yeah, we took a bus from San Antonio Airport to Lackland.
Okay. Getting off that bus, what did you think?
What did I think? Well, it was dark. Now, some of the men that I had worked with, at this date, most of those gentlemen are dead. They had been in the Air Force and the Army, so they kind of tipped me off. Keep your mouth shut, your ears open, and pay attention. So that's what I did. And there was some of us right from the Chicago area. And in fact, there was 6 of us were from what's locally known as the region, covers Calumet City, Southeast Side, Hammond, Whiting, most of Lake County, Indiana. And that's what it's known as nationwide, the region. So we were kind of picked out from the crowd later on trying to acquire a few things when we'd go to the laundry. But we told them we don't have any problems with that. It's just that it would get done.
Okay.
Basic training was okay. It only lasted 6 weeks.
Okay. Where did you go after basic training?
After basic training, I went to tech school at Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado. That's no longer there. That was closed in the 90s. And parts of it is owned by the University of Denver. And the other parts they turned into $500 to $1 million townhouses. No, that's what it is today. And you still have to park your car underneath your front room. They're packed in there like sardines. They almost look like row houses. But that's what they want.
When you say that you did tech school, what do you mean? What kind of tech school?
Tech school or technical school. You were assigned to a squadron. You filled out a dream sheet when you got in the when you applied for the Air Force of what you wanted to do as your specialty. And it first started out as working on the cameras on the F-4s, so it would be electronics. But that didn't pan out, and then they put me in, they administratively removed me from that course, and I went into in the Photolab. So I was a mushroom. Yeah, you sit there and kept in the dark and fed bologna. I'll be nice.
Okay.
That was 9 months I was there in Denver. So, and my wife and I, we had a basement apartment. We lived off base, and money was tight. And maybe we were able to go into the mountains once a month. So, and we made some friends that were from Minnesota, and he was in a National Guard, the Minnesota National Guard, and he was only allowed $114 a month from the state, and his rent was $102 a month. So we would get together, and we had a little more money than they did, so then we'd get together once or twice a month so their kids could get a little bit better to eat and such, and learn that camaraderie amongst one another, that we were there to help each other.
So you didn't live in the barracks and...
No, no. At Lowry, I was in the barracks for 3 weeks, and then I started tech school after that.
Okay.
Those were real old barracks. I mean, they were built the same design as most of them were, but they were they still had rolled linoleum on the floors. There wasn't tile, and coal boiler heat. And this gentleman that was from the Minnesota Guard, they put him on fire watch the first week that we were there, and him and one other fella from Minnesota. So they had to keep the boilers going in 8 barracks. So for the time that they were going to tech school, because they were there for 6 months, the one gentleman was continually coughing up coal dust. So hopefully he got that taken care of, but that's a long time ago. That's 1969.
After Colorado, then where did you go?
I got stationed at Chanute Air Force Base in Rantoul, Illinois.
And how long were you there?
That first time was from 10th of December 69 to the 1st of October 1970. working in a base Photolab, and the Photolab was attached to the school base. So everything in those schools came to our Photolab for their flip charts and stuff. The Air Force has a lot of hands-on tech schools where instead of the actual gauges and such in an aircraft cockpit, they're flat images and they're photographic images of that gauge in each section. So we would have to take photographs of line drawings, and then they would print them again on their photographic plates and then attach them to the simulators that they learned their jobs on. So that, and take pictures of the officers when they come in, when they'd get promoted, and you know, because we had a regular photo studio also. And black and white work, we did a lot of that. And then we didn't do much color printing, if any, but we did a lot of color slides that they would use in their presentations in those particular tech schools. Chanute had firefighter training, reciprocatory engine, prop jobs, jets. They learned how to repair the jets and the gas engines. Minuteman Missile School. There was, shoot, oh my goodness. So many other administration schools that they had, paper shufflers and clerks. There was no police school. That was at Lackland. Some of the guys, they'd get what they call direct duty assignment from basic. So they would be assigned to the firehouse, and then they learn their trade there, or their job that way. And a lot of them, some people, I shouldn't say a lot, but some of them, once you got out of the military, you could use a thing like that. I mean, more practical stuff, or at that time, to be a firefighter or an engine mechanic, you could fall right into it.
How long were you stationed there?
The first time was from December 69 to October 70.
Mm-hmm. And then where'd you go?
And then I got orders. I went to Thailand, to Udorn. That's where they pronounce it up there. And that base was 40 miles southeast of Vientiane, Laos, and about 100, 150 miles from Chiang Mai, Thailand. Excuse me.
Now, did you get to take your wife to Thailand with you?
We could have, but then she'd have had to live off base. And then because it was my first enlistment, they wouldn't provide housing. They didn't have on-base housing anyway, because it's more of a support base for, we were considered a non-combat unit, because we weren't in the combat zone. Like most of Vietnam was a combat zone in parts of the other countries that they still don't want to talk about. But she would have had to live off base, and then subsequently I moved off base, of course. And all her records would have had to follow her and then put in another file under my name. So if she needed any medical attention, she could come to the base and get that done. So we decided that she stayed home. So she moved back in with her parents in Lansing, Illinois.
How long were you over there?
In Thailand, I was there 4.5 months.
And what did you do there?
I worked in a Photolab, was the 14th Tactical Reconnaissance Squadron. It was, our pilots flew unarmed reconnaissance with F-4 Phantoms, and they had armed escorts, excuse me, usually from what they commonly call the Triple Nickel, or 355th Tactical Fighter Squadron. And they were had to go to classified areas in South Vietnam. They would fly over Cambodia or Laos through the zones, through the fly zones. And they'd have to refuel going and refuel coming back. And there was always some photographs where they were taking ground fire and such. Sometimes they would drift over to North Vietnam, and they'd pick up some action there. But then it would be noted in the photographs from the cameras that they'd process the cameras, the film from the cameras. That's what we did. And then there were photo interpreters, and the pilot and his navigator would read all the films and say, okay, this is where I was at, this is what we saw there, and this and that. And then they would set up what was called a sortie for the next day or a couple days after that. And then they'd have other squadrons come in and take care of business.
And what's a sortie?
A sortie is one squadron, could be 2 to 3 planes or 4 planes, and then the fighter squadron, that was the other escort, that would be their sortie. It's just a classification for what they had to do for the day when they flew. So, and most of us, we were on first name basis with the officers. It was yes sir, no sir, lieutenant, commanding, or major, and it was airman. That's first name basis. But there were times that we got a little more friendly than that because we were off duty, and we still kept our distance amongst one another and respected each other for what we had to do and what they did. So it was all right. I was there right at the end of the monsoons, so I didn't catch any rain there. And then from there, I was, they changed my orders, and then I went to Chanute Air Force Base in Saigon, South Vietnam. So,
and
then I did the same thing there.
And how long were you there?
At Chanute, I was there 7.5 months. From February to 1st October. So, and then monsoons, it would rain. I mean, I won't deny it, being in the Air Force, we had good duty. I mean, even though the base we were on was secure to a point. But there were still those that would sneak in and try funny things, and they would always be caught. So, but they never got into where I was at.
Well, living on base, what kind of food did you have?
Well, in the Air Force, we ate on plates. We didn't eat on steel trays. But the Air Force always brags about their food, and the other branches of the service will commend us on that too. Even the Navy.
So it was good food.
Yeah, we had good food. Some of it would take a while for, every one of us got at least one case of the GIs. And that was from, they hired civilian personnel to work in the kitchen, doing KP work and stuff like that. And sometimes, a lot of times the plates weren't that clean, and I used the thumb method. I would stand there in line waiting to get served by the cooks, and I'd check the plates. If they were greasy, I'd put them off to the side from the thumb inspection. And I had a couple cooks ask me, "What are you doing?" I says, "I want to make sure I don't get married to the toilet." So it took me, before I got a case of that, about 6-8 weeks. Other guys had it in a matter of days. And then you go to a dispensary and they give you some pills and you're good to go in a couple of days. But the food was okay. SOS, shit on the shingle. It's all, and they always made it with beef. Never used pork. It's always greasy. Put a couple eggs on top of it and chop it all together and eat it. And Sundays or whatever was a good day, they'd have something different. Pork chops, hamburgers, steaks once in a while. And we found out that when the Air Force orders their food from their contractors, it's the same menu across the world. 6 months at that time. But the cooks at each base could set it up however they wanted it. So some of the dining halls were small, some were large. Where I was at in Thailand, I think they fed about 3,000 to 5,000 at a meal. When I got to Nam, that Pacific dining hall fed 15,000 at a meal. So it was quite a thing just to see that operation that big and come out with a good quality food. And if you got sick after a while, it was your own fault.
How did you stay in touch with your family and friends back home?
Oh, when I was in Thailand, I had to put a stamp on the envelopes and just letters back and forth, or cassette tape. We used that. Once in a while, they had a Mars line set up, is what they called it, and it was you put your name on a list, and it went through every base in Southeast Asia, one call per base, and it would go around, and they would hook up to usually with a ham radio operator, and he would open up his line, and then from that landline in the United States, your phone call would be charged from that ham operator's home to your person's home, where you wanted a call to go to. And there were a couple times where there was a ham radio operator in Lansing, Illinois, where my wife was living, so it was just a local call. We're really lucky on that one. But for me, it would be, when I would get my name on the list, it'd be 7:30 at night, and you'd sit there, and I'd have to be at work I would have to be at work the following morning at 7, and I tell them I'm waiting on a phone call. They say, okay, you could be late. 7:30. From 7:30 in the evening till the next morning, 7:30. I'd sit there and wait so I could get through. And then with the hours difference, it'd be more so in the evening that my wife would get the call. So then what I'd do is I would write to her and tell her I'm going to try to make a call on so-and-so date so that she would be home so we could talk to one another. So, and my mother-in-law would answer the phone. You hear her yell through the house, hey, Sandy, Bert's on the phone. And you could hear her come running to the phone. But you had to, when you talked and you finished your sentence, because you're on a ham radio, you'd have to say, I love you, over. And then it'd come back the same way.
See, where were you when you got out of the service?
I was stationed at Chanute.
Chanute.
Yeah.
Do you remember coming home from Vietnam?
Yes. I can't remember the exact date. It may have been the 2nd or 3rd of October. And we'd left Chanute in the late morning, early afternoon, the day before.
Did you fly home?
Yeah, flew home from there. It was direct flight from Chanute. We landed at Johnson Island, and then from there was nonstop from Johnson Island to Travis Air Force Base in Sacramento, California.
Did you get to go home?
Yes, I was on 30 days leave then when I came to the States. and it actually ends up being the day before, because if I left on left Nam at the 2nd of October, I came home, crossed the international date line, and now it's still the 2nd of October, coming back to the States. And everybody's seen the movie, so we all kissed the concrete when we got to Travis, when we got off the plane. And we're back in the world. So.
And then
from there, I went to San Francisco, the airport. We picked up a sailor at Johnson Island, so he and I palled up for the ride, and then we went to San Francisco. And he was coming home on emergency leave from the Enterprise aircraft carrier. And when we got to San Francisco, when we were in the terminal, we were those that were fortunate enough to get spit on. And we're both in uniform. And we just kind of looked at each other and we just said in unison, it's not worth it. It's time to go home. So he went his direction and I went mine. So we come back to Chicago, down to Lansing.
And then you spent 30 days at home, and then
30 days leave, and then went back to Chanute. I had orders to go back to Chanute.
And that's where you finished up.
That's where I finished, even though when you leave one station or one base and you go to another, you fill out a dream sheet. You guys heard all this. But anyway, I put on continuing overseas tour. I put up for Elmendorf, Alaska. I put for Germany instead of coming back to the United States, just to stay away from some things. And different bases different bases even in the United States that were all spit and polish, like the Academy, the Air Force Academy, and you had to be like the top 5% of your job classification to even apply to get to the Academy. All spit and polish just to stay away from Chanute. And I got orders to go back to Chanute, so that was. And then one man that was there, he was a tech sergeant at the time, and he says, you know, when you came home on leave in April, I was lucky enough to get home leave, because in 1971 everything was winding down in Nam, so they were starting to. They didn't replace the troops, just closing up units and making things smaller. But this gentleman said that he knew I was coming back to Chanute in April of '71, and I had come down there to visit, being on leave for those 2 weeks. And I says, why didn't you tell me that? He says, I was told not to. It's okay. And then the new, what we call NCOIC, is a non-commissioned officer in charge. He says, I understand you don't want to be here. I says, that's right, Sergeant. I says, I left here. I don't really want to be here coming back. He says, okay. He says, every 30 days, there'll be a transfer sitting on the corner of my desk. He says, I'll tell you right now, the only way you're going to get off this base, because you're tied into the school system, the Air Force school system, you're not going to leave here unless you re-enlist. Then you can have a choice of base. But the transfer will be there every 30 days for you to sign. I said, okay, thank you. And he was faithful about it. Very truthful man. And he was a type of man that, he was actually a World War II veteran in the Army Air Corps. And he got out, used the GI Bill. He had everything signed. He was going to go work for the oil companies in Venezuela, U.S. oil companies. And then when he got called back in 1947, and he says, well, now you guys screwed me up, now it's my turn. And from that day forward, he decided to screw them in pleasant ways, but kept his stuff together till he retired. And there wasn't a person that he didn't know that did not owe him a favor. That's the type of man he was. So, but if you needed something, or even if you needed to borrow a few dollars, which legally you weren't supposed to do. You're supposed to borrow money from your own rank, not from higher rank. You need 20? Okay, here. See me payday. That was it, no questions asked. No, he was a good man. But again, the Chanute, some of the things that I did work for the schools at Chanute, I didn't actually get to touch hands on them until 1991, 20 years later. Was when my son was in the Boy Scouts, and we arranged a trip to Chanute. We stayed in the barracks. Family members were always allowed to come on our camp out, so my wife and my two daughters came also. And stayed in barracks, ate in the dining halls, and then I got to touch the Minuteman missile. In the silo. That's how they had full-size simulations, so you knew exactly what to expect once you got out of school and you start working on these things. So, but working in the Photolab, I only got to see photographs, so that there was other guys who were out taking photographs of the stuff. So it was an exciting trip. What else?
Have you remained in contact with any of your fellow veterans?
Yes, over the years. Anymore, we just trade Christmas cards. There's a guy from Erie, Pennsylvania. I can't think of his last name. It'll come to me. One guy's from, another fellow's from Dixon, Tennessee, Donnie Farthing. I think he's retired from CSX Railroad. He got on apprenticeship there, and he got to sit in the front of the train and drive. So he liked that. Another fella, he got out of the Air Force since a little after I did, and he went through, and they still have it today, it's what they call Project Transition, where the last 6 months you're on active duty and you're not going to re-enlist. You can go to any school that's offered on the base or correspondence, and the Air Force pays for it. So he took an electronics course, and he finished that, basic electronics, and he was looking through the Denver Post and found an ad for electronic technicians in Las Vegas. The man hired him over the phone. He's still there today. He's never left Vegas. And he worked at Stardust for 19 years. And the man he worked for, that gentleman retired, and when he retired, my friend Jim was put in charge. He had 13 technicians working on slots, repair the slots. And when when they were getting ready to close the Stardust, he left there, and he got hired at another company where the last time we saw him was about 5 years ago, and now he has over 100 technicians. So he's done very well for himself.
What did you do after you got out of the service?
I went back with the electricians for a while, but I got into the Teamsters, so that I stayed with that, driving. But worked at the electrical contractor in Indiana for some time, and then I got laid off, and then I went to did some other work in the trucking industry, and then I got hired where I'm at now. So I've been there 35 years. And still driving, and it's all local work. No over-the-road stuff, and I don't drive a semi anymore. So I'm home every night.
I know that you're a member of the American Legion. Are you a member of any other veterans organizations?
Out of VFW, last 5 or 6 years. When I came home from Nam, and got out of the Air Force, I went to the VFW, and at that time, those veterans, World War II and Korean veterans, are all actually the same generation. They didn't want anything to do with us. So I said, okay, fine. See you later. And the same thing when I first tried at the American Legion when I got out in '73, and they were the same way, even though my brother-in-law was one of the first Vietnam veterans to join the specific post that I'm in Lansing. And they didn't even want to hear it. I mean, my brother-in-law and his friends, they had nothing against that because they were in Vietnam also. But it was just those that were in charge at the time. They didn't want any more. So I waited and waited, and then I joined later.
How did your wartime experience affect your life?
Everything was fine. Still, when I came home, I'm still on that, that clock. So I was up at different hours when others weren't. And it was a cold winter, going from 85 plus degrees to watching your spit freeze, standing outside. So I wore my long johns to bed for about 3 months. I did have a problem with drinking, you could say. My wife was scared of the amount that I was drinking, and it took her 3 years to come out and talk to me about it. So other than that, it's a little standoffish for a while. Just, as I was told, keep your mouth shut and your ears open. So that's what I did.
What are some life lessons you learned from military service?
Life lessons. Continue to rely on those that you trust. Still be very leery of strangers, very leery. Even though I was only a support troop, I was not out in combat. There were things that you picked up being in those situations where when you came home, you sat close to the door so you could get out quicker than anybody else, or you sat with your back to the wall because then you knew there was nobody behind you. And even today, I taught my children to stay in the habit of, if you're there with your wife or your husband and your children, no matter where they go, you know exactly where they're at. If you're in a building somewhere, keep them close. As I said, even when we had a color guard unit in our post, we were very active, and there was 6 of us. Any one of us, we could go up to our buddy and say, where's so-and-so? Without even looking, he's over there. How about so-and-so? He's over there. Oh, he's upstairs. He's downstairs. We knew where everybody was at. So that's the thing that I pass on to my children. Active in scouting, and that pass it on there. Buddy system, they've been practicing that for 100 years. So never forget your buddy. Stay with him. Even if you don't like him, if that's your buddy for the day, you'll learn to trust him, and then you'll be together. So, and learn to be a good team member. More hands makes the job easier. So,
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will hear and view this interview?
No more. I think we're getting too far stretched out, and we need to bring our people home and protect our own. But with the young people, that's what they've chosen to do, to go in the military. Take care of your buddy. Stick together and get as much out of them as you can. You keep your nose clean, because the only way you're going to get up in the military is to keep your nose clean. And well, on the good side, we've been fortunate with the Scouts. We have 2 men that are Air Force Academy graduates, so they're pilots. We got one that's retired Army. He worked on the Apaches, so he was in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that gentleman also was in Germany. And we got another fella that's going to be retiring next year or two from the Air Force Reserve. He's a paramedic. So, and his dad was Air Force, and we all tell him the same thing. You know, keep your nose clean, do what you got to do, and don't piss off anybody. Make sure whatever you do is right and correct, and you'll keep moving up in the ranks. So far, so good. So, but other than that, stay home. Unless there is no other choice. So far, we haven't had any, in the Scout Troop, we haven't had any bad apples, but we have had some where single parent, whether it be the mother's there or the father's there. So that's a thing with scouting too. You help them along, show them those values and that trust. And the boys will come to you and ask you, what do you think of this, Mr. Gangolf? I says, that's all I can tell you is what I've done. There's 4 or 5 other gentlemen here. We're in the military. You can talk to them. It's your choice. It's not mine. But if you haven't got any place else to go, do that. And I says, and I believe they still have dollar for dollar for school. I said, put your money away and make them put their money away. So when you get out, you can finish schooling, go to college, or do it in the military. So we have one gentleman. He's a retired police chief. He came and spoke to the boys some time ago, and he was a corpsman, Navy corpsman, so he's attached to the Marines. And when he spoke to the boys several weeks ago, sometime in May 2014, he says he's gone over hundreds and hundreds of applications for men and women that want to be police officers. And he says, stay in school. Don't go 2 years college, go 4. A's and B's. He says, if I see a C on a test, on an application, it gets thrown in the garbage. That's the way this man is. Stay in school. Be the top of whatever you want to be. And he says most other departments or state units, state police or whatever, county sheriffs are the same way. If you don't have straight A's, forget it. So that's a thing to pass on too, stay in school. But again, not everybody's cut out for college.
Well, at this time, what I'd like to say is thank you. Thank you for serving our country.
Thanks.
And I'd also like to thank you for your interview. And most of all, I'd like to thank you for letting me be the one that interviewed you today.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.